I remember the day I joined the Army, straight out of college, eager to serve my country. The military structure felt like the perfect fit. Over the years, I found purpose in my duties. But with each deployment, pieces of my personal life were left behind. After nearly 30 years, I retired. Marcy and I had faced many challenges. Together, we were raising our kids amidst the chaos, despite thinking our bond was strong. Adjusting to civilian life proved harder than I expected, and we started drifting apart. The warning signs were subtle, and I missed them. I realized that our trust in each other was fragile. We lived in a cul-de-sac with modest homes at our first block party. Now that we're empty nesters, we met our neighbors. Our son Kyle was in college, and our daughter Rhonda had joined the Navy, which I wasn't too happy about, as I'm a retired Army colonel. Marcy got stuck talking to Chuck from across the street and wasn't happy about it. She signaled for me to save her, but I was busy chatting with Jenny, a fit single. When Marcy gave me a more urgent look, I brought Jenny over to Chuck, freeing Marcy, but she wasn't impressed with how long it took me. As we left, we exchanged nods with the Nealons, a young couple who seemed to share an odd, almost conspiratorial look. My years and intelligence made me suspicious, but I followed Marcy, hoping for some prey. After years of military life, our marriage was under a lot of pressure. We nearly divorced during my posting, but we managed to work things out. But deep down, I knew something had happened during that rough patch. Infidelity is common in military marriages, but no one likes to admit it. Marcy and I were lucky to still be together. I suspected she had cheated while I was away. How did I know? A tip from my ex. My girlfriend, who managed a hotel near Marcy's work, told me she'd seen her at the Red Roof Inn. I even hired an investigator, but it turned out Marcy's hospital was under renovation, and she'd parked there out of necessity. Still, her early arrivals at work stopped when I returned home, leaving me uncertain. Our time in Korea took a toll on our family. A year apart created a gap I couldn't close. The strain made me realize our marriage wasn't unbreakable. I never discovered who the other man might have been. Marcy was committed to fixing things, as was I. I eventually gave up my love for flying to become an Army intelligence officer, despite multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan after 9/11. This new role gave Marcy some peace of mind, but I was still worried about our marriage and decided to retire rather than pursue a general star, knowing another deployment could end us in retirement. My consulting job paid better than staying in the Army, and I was there for my kids' graduations with Marcy. Marcy kept up with her nursing education and became the top nurse on a brain surgery team. She worked closely with Dr. Trey Cardosa, a talented, confident surgeon. I noticed how he looked at Marcy, and her praise for him made me uneasy when I expressed my concerns. Marcy admitted that flirting at work helped relieve stress, but insisted it went no further. She reminded me of my close working relationship with a CIA colleague, Derry, before deploying to Iraq, though Derry had shown interest in. I had to trust Marcy, just as she had trusted me with Dira. The conversation didn't go well and stayed on my mind. The truth was, Marcy had a reason to be suspicious. Dira made a move on me after an ambush in Iraq, and in a moment of weakness, I almost gave in. We were interrupted before anything happened, and I convinced myself it evened the score for whatever Marcy might have done in Korea. But deep down, I knew I was only fooling myself. Now Marcy and her team were heading to South America for 6 weeks with Doctors Without Borders. I wasn't thrilled about her being with Dr. Trey, but I didn't want to disrupt her career after all the support she had given me during mine. She said, "I've stayed home for you many times. Now it's your turn to wait for me." What could I say to that? Things were tense when she left for the airport. She spent the night packing and talking to her mom, leaving us with little time together. I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. The next morning, she was gone. No goodbye, no note. I checked her messages, but found none. I was annoyed and worried. After calming down with coffee, I tracked her flight to Colombia and hoped she would call or text upon landing, but she didn't. I sent her a brief message, "I hope you're okay." It was a nice way to leave. Leave Marcy speaks volumes. I didn't get a reply that day or the next. Running usually helped clear my head, but frustration pushed me to run faster. Nearing our cul-de-sac, I was out of breath when Vincent Nealon called out to me. He lived behind us, and his wife Leslie was in the... He noticed where I was looking and joked, "Nice view in the garden, huh?" I brushed it off, saying I needed a shower. He invited me over, even without Marcy suggesting, and brought steaks and drinks. His wife smiled, and her subtle movements added to the strange vibe. I took the long way home, still preoccupied with Marcy's silence. After a shower, I sat in our empty house waiting for a call that never came. It was dark when I finally decided to call her hotel. I knew her itinerary and room number, but there was no answer. I spoke with the hotel manager, Pablo. Espinosa said she'd checked in, but he seemed a bit guarded. He said he'd check on her and have her call me, but I had a feeling something was off. I then searched my contacts for Marcy's close colleague, Penny Washington, hoping she might know more. Just then, my phone rang. It was Pablo from Bogat, not Marcy. "Hello, Pablo," I answered. "Any news about my wife, Senores?" "She wasn't in her room. Maybe she's with some other ladies?" He was getting less cooperative. "Can you do me a favor, Pablo?" "Yes, Senores." He was less polite than before. "What's Dr. Trey?" "Cardo's room is 514, Senores. Would you like me to call him?" I cringed. "Marcy's room is 515. Pablo, one more thing. I'm busy. Please call Mrs. Penny Washington's room." After a pause, he agreed. I waited on hold. Finally, Penny answered. She knew. It was me, probably tipped off by Pablo. "Hi, Penny," I said. "Sorry to bother you. Where is my wife?" She grew irritated. "Why do you ask?" "Don't play games, Penny. Marcy's room is next to Trey's and she's not in it. You know why? Rick, you should talk to your wife. But I overheard a man asking who is that. Maybe I should talk to your husband about the man in your room, Penny. I have his number." She quickly responded, pleading, "Please don't call my husband. This is the first time. I don't care how many times you've cheated. Penny, tell me where my wife is or I'll call him right now." Reluctantly, Penny transferred me to Trey's room. The phone rang and Trey answered, thinking it was Penny. "Sorry to interrupt, Trey. It's Rick Weston. I need to talk to my wife." Then he played dumb, asking Trey, "Why are you asking me? If you value your hands, put Marcy on the phone now." After some noise, I heard Marcy's voice on the phone. "Trey," she said, "I didn't expect this conversation tonight. What are you doing in his room? Why didn't you respond to my texts? What do you think? I was having a good evening after a stressful day until you called. Just tell me the truth. Are you and Trey having an affair?" She paused, then asked Trey to leave after a moment of silence. Finally, Rick spoke. "I've been a good wife and mother. I'll be home in 6 weeks and we can talk then, but right now just let me have this, if I don't mind." Stunned, I replied, "You didn't even have the decency to talk to me before you left. All that would have done is start a fight," Rick said, all sarcasm. "Maybe I would have asked you to stay. I might have stayed," she admitted. "I needed this just once to feel alive." "Trey's just a distraction," Rick said. "I don't love him. How convenient." Then I heard a knock at the door. "Marcy, I have to go. I told her I love you, Rick." "I love you too, Marcy, but I'm not sure I'm still in love with you." "I'll be good, but I do have some questions." "Ask away," she replied, searching for wine glasses as I poured. "Where's Vincent? He's out playing cards with friends." "I see," I said, thinking about how often I left Marcy alone during my military career. "Mark's in South America, right?" Leslie asked. "Have you heard from her?" I replied, thinking about how I had just been talking to her when you knocked. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?" "No, we said what needed to be said. I think we need to." We locked eyes, both of us questioning Leslie. She pursed her lips and then nodded. "Let's sit," I suggested, pointing to the living room. She sat at a slight distance from me, crossing her legs. "How much has Marcy told you?" she asked, flipping the question back to me. "I had hoped Marcy talked to you before she left," I replied. "Did she?" "No," I said. "I ended up playing phone tag with her, only to find out she's in South America with her doctor boyfriend. Then she told me to talk to you, so let's stop the games. What did you and Marcy plan?" Before she left, Leslie took a long sip of wine, needing some courage. "Marcy and I ran into each other at the mall some time ago, and we ended up having drinks at my place. I don't know where you and Vincent were, but we talked and I opened up about my marriage and my husband's interests." She paused, deciding how much to reveal, so I waited in silence. "My husband likes to share." She finally admitted to sharing you with me. I asked her to confirm, and she did. "I told Marcy because I wanted her to know so she might let me pursue you." "How did Marcy take that?" I asked. At first she was shocked. She listened quietly as I explained later. She agreed on the condition that it happens while she's out of the country. I was amazed at the situation. Marcy never discussed this with me. She dropped that bombshell on me tonight, just as you were on your way over. Leslie was clearly surprised by the timing. "I found out about her and Dr. Trey tonight. My husband and I have an open marriage, but we never go behind each other's backs, so Vincent knows you're here." I asked for clarity. She confirmed that he knows I'm attracted to you and has no issue with it. "You've had other steady partners." I asked. "Just one off and on for 2 years?" She explained. "We mostly meet men out of town for adventures and Vincent watches." I asked. "Yes, it's safer that way," she said casually. I shook my head in disbelief. "How long have you two been doing this?" She replied. 4 years. I asked, trying to piece it all together. "Yes, but only while she's away," I pressed further. "No," she admitted, "but but I had a feeling she might be doing something similar. Maybe giving me permission to be with you eased her conscience. I wish she talked to me. Leslie handed me a letter Marcy left for me before we got started. It simply read, Rick. I took a deep breath and opened it. Dear Rick, by now you know I'm breaking our vows with Trey. But before you judge me, remember, dear Dre, in the Middle East, I have proof that you slept with her. I helped you with your Army intelligence classes, and I noticed how you looked away whenever I mentioned her. You're a terrible liar, Rick. When Trey first touched me, I didn't tell you. Maybe I should have, just like I should have had affairs during those lonely years when you were off. I was tempted to play soldier, especially when you were in Korea, but I stayed true to you then. Dear visited me while you were in the Middle East, and her smugness confirmed my suspicions. I'm almost sure you were unfaithful. If I'm wrong, then I'm the first to cheat, but I doubt it. So here's the deal. While I'm gone, I'm not your wife and you're not my husband. We both have a 6-month-old. I'm going to give you a week to think about this. If we still love each other when I return, we can move forward. If not, we'll have to accept that we've lost what we had. I'm choosing this, Rick, of my own free will. I don't love Trey, but I find him attractive. He'll be nothing but a memory if you still want me. If you love someone, set them free. I'll be back in 6 weeks. Meet me at the Ambassador Hotel near the airport if you want to try again. If not, don't come to the airport, just walk away. Love always, Marcy. P.S. Leslie was supposed to get tested for STDs before tonight. Make sure the results are in. Trey and I were tested before we left, and I'll get tested again before I return. This is our first step toward trust. After reading the letter, I noticed Leslie at the kitchen island refilling her glass. Are you okay? I replied that I would be. She nodded and returned with the bottle, sitting closer this time. She refilled my glass and looked at me with those doe-like eyes. So, Rick, what do we do now? Right now, nothing, I said firmly. You and Marcy planned this. I only heard about this tonight, 2 weeks later. It seems like she's been up to something for a while. Am I right? Leslie admitted, looking down. She said she wasn't used to someone resisting her charms. If I were single, it might be different, but I don't like being played, especially by someone I've loved for most of my life. You said this was her way of easing her guilt. It's clear this was planned behind my back. She even told you what wine to bring. I don't appreciate being used like that. I understand how you feel, she said quietly. So I guess there's no chance of anything happening between us tonight. I replied that I needed time to think before I made any decisions, so could she count on me joining them for dinner in a day or two? I don't know, Leslie. I need to sort things out. We'll see. Okay, she said softly. Just know I'm here for you. Thanks, Leslie. I said goodnight, and thanks for the wine. She took that as her cue to leave. I couldn't help but admire her as she walked out. After she left, I reread Marcy's letter. It's amazing what you can really see the difference when you take the time to analyze it. Marcy's tone was really negative when she wrote about Dear, even though she wasn't sure we'd slept together. Then a few paragraphs later, she was practically encouraging me to sleep with Leslie. It didn't make sense to me. Yes, Dear and I got close in the Middle East, but we never had sex. It happened once after surviving an ambush. It wasn't planned like Marcy's affair with Trey. This whole setup with Leslie made me feel guilty at the time, but I also suspected Marcy had cheated. It seemed like a twisted form of justice. I also wondered why Marcy didn't want me to meet her at the airport. Was she afraid I'd get angry? I'd never given her any reason to think I'd get violent. And why meet at the hotel instead of coming home? Then it hit me. Was she really that devious? She'd plotted all this right under my nose. The answer seemed clear, but what was really going on? I scanned the room, suspicious of any surveillance devices. Could there be a camera in the smoke alarm? I decided to make some. I made a few calls, but not inside, just in case I was being monitored. I grabbed Marcy's itinerary and stepped outside to the swing chair on the porch. Marcy knows I'm a consultant, but she doesn't know I'm actually the senior security consultant for Acme Global, responsible for the safety of our offices worldwide. I have contacts I can call on when needed. My first call was to Alan Williams, the top tech specialist in my department. He answered the phone with a straightforward, "Williams, Alan. This is Rick. How's it going?" I asked. "Good, boss," Alan replied, "but I doubt you called just to chat." "No, I didn't. I told him I needed his expertise. I then gave him a quick overview of the situation and my concerns. "Sorry to hear that, Rick, I understand," Alan said sympathetically. "Give me 45 minutes to get my gear, and I'll be over." "Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it," I said before hanging up. Next, I scrolled through my contacts and made another call. I called Ernesto, who was based in Bogota, the same city where Marcy and her lover were staying. I trusted him completely. "How are you doing there, boss?" he said. "I didn't expect your call today," I replied. "What can I do for you?" I gave him the same rundown I'd given Alan. "I need eyes and ears on the ground," he replied. "Right, Ernesto," I said. "I'll provide." Give him the hotel details, room numbers, and the manager's name. "Can you handle it?" "Absolutely." "You want audio, video, and pictures?" "Yes, the works. Send me daily updates and let me know if you need any extra funds." "Got it. I'll get started and be in touch soon." "Thanks, Ernesto. I appreciate it. Send my best to your family. We'll talk soon." After the call, I emailed him Marcy's itinerary shortly after Alan arrived with his equipment. 30 minutes later, he found wireless cameras in several rooms, mostly hidden in smoke detectors, and a few microphones. Our landline had also been bugged. These don't have much range. Alan noted there's probably a receiver nearby. We searched and found a box with a laptop in the attic. It was locked, but Alan figured it stored and uploaded data from the cameras and microphones. Alan discovered the gear belonged to Smith Investigations with an address and phone number conveniently labeled. "What do you want me to do with this?" Alan asked. I considered disabling everything, but decided differently. "I'll disable the camera and mic in my office, but leave the rest. I'll make it boring." Alan chuckled and removed the devices from my office. He then checked the computer Marcy and I shared and found a keylogger and spyware installed, which he removed. "Why do you think she did all this?" I asked. "Probably setting you up for something, maybe a divorce." Alan suggested, confirming my suspicions. "You're probably right." Alan also suggested that if the investigator had installed all this, they might still have a key. He advised me to change the locks and security codes, which I did. "Thanks for everything, Alan." After he left, I called a locksmith to change the locks and codes, just to be on the safe side. While I was waiting for the locksmith, I noticed something odd about Marcy's account on our shared computer. Her email was open without needing a password, and her credentials were saved. She hadn't updated them as I had suggested. I was glad she didn't follow my advice. Normally, I respected her privacy, but this situation was different. I searched through her emails and found several. I also found some emails between Marcy and Trey, the doctor she's now seeing in Bogota. I exported and saved them to a thumb drive so I could look at them later. There were also emails with our kids, but nothing to worry about. When the locksmith arrived, I showed him the doors that needed new locks and went back to the computer. One email thread between Marcy and Trey had the subject line "lawyer," which caught my attention. In the thread, Marcy told Trey she'd spoken with her lawyer, reviewed the proposed divorce settlement, and decided to move forward despite her lawyer's advice. Trey seemed. I was surprised and asked her why she was doing this, since she had said she loved me and wanted to stay with me. Marcy's response was chilling. She planned to stay with me, but on her terms. She also said that I had been a cuck for years without knowing it. She went on to explain her plan, saying that she would give me divorce papers at the Ambassador Hotel when she got back. She said she'd put pressure on me to sign a postnuptial agreement. She said she'd use evidence of my affair with Leslie to ruin me financially. She even mentioned the possibility of suing Leslie for alienation of affection. She was tightening her grip on the situation. Trey, I told her I was worried about the risks she was taking, but Marcy seemed confident that she had everything under control. She even admitted to having cheated on me for years, starting when I was stationed in Korea. After reading the thread, I printed it out for safekeeping. By then, the locksmith had finished, and I paid him, including a tip for the after-hour service. I shut down the computer and went out for a burger and a beer, picking up some cigars to calm my nerves. I noticed a dark SUV following me. It was likely the private investigator Marcy had hired. Despite trying to shake him, he stayed on my tail. When I pulled into Jan's Bar and Grill, he was there too. I got out, walked up to the SUV and opened the door, startling the driver. "Who are you and why are you following me?" I demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about," the man stammered. "You've been tailing me." "Since I left my house, have you been following me?" He replied nervously. "I don't know what you mean." I told him, "I'm fed up with liars. Maybe I should teach you a lesson." He pleaded, "Please don't strike me. I'll leave." I said, "Don't ever let me see you near me again." "Got it," he replied. I told him I got it, I'm sorry, and he drove off. Once he was gone, I went inside, ordered a burger and beer, and sat at the bar. The bartender asked, reading my mood. "Yeah, you could say that." I replied, "Can't live with him, can't shoot him," and he joked, making me chuckle. I finished my meal. When I got home, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and went outside for a cigar. As I smoked, a plan started forming in my mind. I searched Google, checked my calendar, and picked a date. I then made a few calls to set everything in motion. Just then, I received a text from Ernesto. "All set. First update. In the morning, please send for expenses." I quickly sent the money via PayPal and added a note saying thanks. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I finished my beer and cigar, then went upstairs curious. I opened Marcy's nightstand drawer and found her rings. I took off my wedding ring and placed it beside hers. Then I looked up at the camera I knew was hidden in the smoke detector and flipped it off. The next morning, I checked Marcy's email and found a new message titled, "Bin." It was detailed how I had discovered the surveillance of equipment and the investigator tailing me. I marked the email as unread and logged it. I went out after work to review the footage Ernesto sent of Marcy and Trey. It wasn't anything special, but I noted her remark to Trey, "He's probably with that girl next door. I'll have the video for my lawyer tomorrow." I ended the video and called Ernesto. "Thanks for the money. Did you see the..." I showed Ernesto the footage and told him I had a plan I wanted to run by him. I outlined my idea and he said it could be done in 10 days. "Why 10 days?" he asked. "That's our 25th wedding anniversary," I said. "I want to make sure she never forgets it." "You're one tough hombre, Nor," Rick laughed after ending the call. I called and found Dre's number. I hadn't spoken to her since we were in the Middle East. I was surprised when she answered. I told her what was going on, and she listened, looking shocked when I read her Marcy's letter. She was pretty mad at me, saying I was lying. I told her I never said anything like that. We were just a team watching each other's backs. "Thanks, dear. I regret what happened between us, but I don't think what Marcy's doing now is justified." I said to Rick, "You have nothing to apologize for. We were under extreme stress and I don't regret it, so what's your next move?" I told Dreer my plan and waited for her reaction. After a moment, she replied, "I like it. I really like it. I have someone in Colombia handling part of it, but I don't have access to everything I need for the rest. I think I can help with that." She said, "When do you want this done?" "In 10 days, on our 25th anniversary. I replied, "Oh, you're wicked." She laughed and said, "Consider it my anniversary gift to you." We both laughed. Then she added, "You know, I've thought about you a lot since the war in the Middle East." I said, "I've thought about you too." We made a great team. I haven't connected with anyone like that since. She said, a hint of sadness in her voice, "I'm sorry to hear that." I responded, "That's life." She replied with a sigh, "I've been thinking about retiring. They've got me pushing papers now. If you do retire, I know a place that would be perfect for you." I suggested that she hire me, and she asked if I'd be working with a retired Army colonel. I confirmed that I'd be delighted to reconnect with her. She then asked Rick if he thought we could reconnect, and I answered honestly. She made her choices. I'm not going back to her. She said it was good because she wanted to finish what we started in the Middle East. I agreed, but I need to handle a few things first. She said she understood, but she didn't want to wait too long. I told her I wouldn't. I promised this divorce would take some time, though. "I understand," she replied. "Just know I'm here if you need someone to talk to. It's great hearing your voice again." I told her sincerely yours, too. She replied warmly. "But my dinner's getting cold, so I'll talk to you soon." I teased you'd better. She joked back after we ended the call. I felt better than I had in a long time. I was really touched that doctor still cared. I was brought back to reality by knocking at the back door. It was Leslie with a plate of lasagna. "I thought you might be hungry," she said. "Mind if I come in?" I replied, "No, please come in." She smiled and set the plate down. "I hope you like it, or maybe you'd prefer something else." I was tempted, but decided against it. My conversation with Dear Doctor reminded me of what really mattered, as tempting as that sounds. "I'll have to pass." Her expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" "I do find you attractive, but Marcy's got a camera right there. Why don't you wave hello?" She looked up at the detector, shocked. "Are you serious? You do?" She shook her head, clearly unsettled. "I had no idea. Come to my office," I suggested once there. I handed her a printout of the emails between Marcy and Trey. After reading them, she was stunned. "Oh my God, I didn't know, Rick. I swear I believe you." I assured her she played us both. "What are you?" she asked, sounding concerned. I replied, "I'm filing for divorce and won't be with one until it's finalized." She asked, hopefully, "Can we still be friends?" I said, "Of course, but nothing more." "Okay, Rick," she sighed. "I'm sorry about everything. Enjoy the lasagna." "Thanks, Leslie," I responded, escorting her to the door. I watched her leave through the back door. She looked good in those shorts, but I wasn't about to risk everything after she was gone. I changed into my running gear, figuring the lasagna would still be warm when I returned after my run and a shower. I dug into the lasagna. It was loaded with cheese, mushrooms, and meat. It was just the way I like it, meat and all. It hit the spot. I washed the plate, grabbed a beer, and headed to my office. I paused to flip off the camera in the front room. First, I checked Marcy's email. She had responded to the investigator, telling him to ease off for now. There were no other significant emails. Then I checked her finances. We had 3 accounts, one for each of us and a shared household account. I noticed she had saved quite a bit, but also paid a hefty retainer to attorney Allison Hargraves and a significant amount to Smith Investigations. A few Victoria's Secret charges also stood out. Nothing I hadn't seen her wear anything out of the ordinary, but I was curious about Hargraves. I did a quick search and found she was a family law attorney and author who promoted female marriages. Her book had stirred some controversy, and she was known for pushing the hot wife and cuck lifestyle. I bought the cheapest Kindle version and took it to the patio with a beer and cigar after skimming through it. It was clear Hargraves had a strong disdain for men. I couldn't believe Marcy chose her as an attorney. It spoke volumes. My phone buzzed and I saw a text from Ernesto. He could arrange what I needed, but it would cost $1. I decided to transfer the money from Marcy's account, making sure that any trace would lead back to her. I messaged Ernesto to confirm the transfer was done. The next few days flew by. My routine became checking Ernesto's updates, Marcy's email, going to work, running, eating, unwinding with a beer, cigar, and TV. Before bed, I didn't care that Marcy never called or texted. I was enjoying the silence, as whatever love I had for her was gone. I saw Leslie only once after showing her the emails. When I returned the plate, Vince invited me to dinner, but I declined, saying I had things to do. He seemed disappointed, but I was relieved. Leslie stayed away. I didn't need that distraction. The best part of my days was talking to Derry. We chatted every couple of days about everything, life, dreams, pets, even my kids. The more we talked, the closer I felt to her. I realized I was falling for her. Eventually, I scheduled a meeting with Allison Hargraves. Her receptionist welcomed me with coffee, and I shook Allison's hand as I introduced myself. She seemed to be about my age. Dressed and in decent shape, I noticed the ring on her finger and wondered what kind of life her husband led. "You're considering a divorce?" Allison Hargraves asked. "Yes," I replied. "My name is Weston." She checked her computer and then asked, "What's your wife's name?" "Marcy, short for Marcia." "Mr. Weston, I can't represent you. I'm already representing your wife because of a conflict of interest. I figured I also know you only represent women, which seems a bit strange to me." She stared at me. "If you knew that, why did you come to see me as a retired Army intelligence officer?" "I like to understand my enemy." "Is that how you see me? I read your book and your New York Times interview. You recruit your clients into your lifestyle as your business, right? Did you know Marcy was going to Columbia and what she planned to do? That's privileged information." I nodded. "I noticed you're married. Your book's chapter on controlling husbands was interesting. Do you treat your husband the way you suggest, humiliating him?" "Controlling him is none of your concern, Mr. Weston. I think this meeting is over." I smiled and stood up. "I'd like to say it was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Hargraves, but that would be a lie. We'll likely meet again. Good day." As I left, I added, "By the way, I found your book disgusting. Have a good day." I walked out, noticing the receptionist smiling as I left, possibly overhearing our conversation. Finally, our 25th anniversary arrived. I took the day off, knowing it would be eventful. Early that morning, Derry texted me, confirming she had done what I asked. Later, I received a message from Ernesto. "Check your email." I opened the video he sent. It showed a dirt road with a makeshift checkpoint. 3 SUVs approached, and armed soldiers stopped them. They searched the vehicles and found something significant led to more soldiers arriving. Trey and Marcy were pulled from their SUV, handcuffed, and taken away. A tow truck hauled the SUV off, and the other vehicles were eventually waved through. I was shocked, so I immediately called Ernesto. I saw the video. "Ernesto, what happened?" "We planted the stuff as planned, just a small amount, but it turns out Trey was smuggling large quantities. My guys saw the pills being loaded and backed off to avoid cartel involvement." "Good call. So, where are Marcy and Trey now?" "They're both in jail. It seems Marcy might have known about the pills, but it's unclear how much they have. They have 48 hours to present the case to a judge, and the investigation could take up to 90 days, but I doubt it'll take that long. The consulate knows they should be aware by now." Ernesto confirmed. "I'll keep you updated." "Thanks, Ernesto. It's not what I expected, but if Marcy's involved in trafficking, she deserves what she gets after ending the call." I contacted Dara to fill her in. She wasn't too surprised and offered to reach out to her contacts in Colombia to gather more information. "I'll let you know as soon as I hear something." While waiting to hear back from Dara, I gathered a trash bag and went through the house, removing all the cameras and microphones that Marcy's PI had installed. I also grabbed the receiver and laptop from the attic, tossed everything into the bag, and set it in the driveway. Then I called Smith Investigations. A woman answered. I said, "I want to speak to the head honcho." "Head honcho," I demanded. Okay, sir. One moment," she stammered, clearly taken aback. A few seconds later, I recognized the voice of the man I had confronted at Yan's, James Smith. "How can I help you?" "This is Rick Weston, remember me?" I asked, my tone firm. "Your client is now in a Colombian jail on pill trafficking charges. I've removed all your gear from my house. It's in a trash bag in my driveway." I said I'd call him back tomorrow. I hung up, not interested in hearing anything more from him. The next morning, the bag was gone. I figured Smith had picked it up, but I didn't really care. Soon after, Dira called. I spoke with the station chief in Bogota. She said, "What did you find out?" I asked. "The Colombian authorities have been keeping an eye on Trey since he arrived. It seems he's connected to a major pill cartel. If Marcy's involved, she could be looking at a long prison sentence. The judge on the case is tough on foreigners." Dira explained how much time she could get. I asked how long she could get. "At least 10 years, she replied. I asked how much they were caught with. She said, "Well, if they're guilty, they deserve it." The weight of the situation was about 20 lbs of white powder and flea powder. She informed me. "Damn," I muttered. "I expect a visit from the State Department soon." Dira warned, "Let me know how it goes." I replied, "I will." I ended the call. Afterward, I contacted the hotel in Bogota. When Pablo answered, I asked to be connected to Penny Washington's room. Penny answered nervously. "Penny, it's Rick Weston. Do you know where Marcy is? It's our anniversary and I wanted to reach her. Is she out with Trey?" "No, it's Rick," Penny replied, her voice shaking. "Marcy and Trey were arrested at a checkpoint for drug trafficking. The soldiers took them away. We were questioned and told to stay at the hotel. It's like house arrest." "Have you told Josh?" I asked, pointingly. "No," she admitted quietly. "Penny, I'm going to. I'll speak to him soon." I told her, "Please, Rick, don't tell him, it'll destroy him." She pleaded, "Not as much as your cheating will I." I replied sharply, "He deserves to know." I ended the call and immediately contacted Josh, giving him the details and offering to send video evidence of Penny's affair. "Thanks for telling me, Rick. This will be the last time she cheats on me." Josh said he'd sent the videos to me. I also got in touch with a divorce lawyer and made an appointment for her in 3 days. A couple of days later, my boss, Bill Hastings, asked me to come into his office. There was also a man from the State Department called Thomas Herman there. "Rick, your wife Marcia has been arrested in Colombia for drug trafficking. Thomas said we can keep an eye on the situation, but we can't interfere with local laws. She's also been put on a no-fly list. So, we need to put her on a flight list so that she can't return to the U.S., even if she is released." "How much time is she facing?" I asked. "Up to 12 years. Bill said he'd be in touch after Thomas left. He also said that this could affect my security clearance and job. I should take some time off to get this under control." "Bill, thanks. I'm back home now. I've been looking through Marcy's emails for anything suspicious. I found an exchange with Trey from 3 months before their trip. Trey asked if Marcy wanted to make extra money in Colombia. She was a bit unsure at first, but she agreed to his plan. "Good choice," Marcy Trey replied. "Trust me, you'll be glad you did." She printed out the email chain, saved it as a PDF, and added it to a thumb drive with other incriminating emails. Next, she reviewed the videos, skipping the physical parts, and found a conversation the day before they were caught. She noted the timestamp. "Are you ready? Tomorrow's the big day," Trey asked. "I think so," Marcy replied, sounding nervous. "Good. The product will be in our vehicle tomorrow morning in boxes marked as medicine. We won't even have to touch it, and you're sure we won't get caught? I've been on that road many times. There are no checkpoints. If this works, we can do it again and retire with the money." "Sounds good to me," she said. "I've saved the video to my thumb drive and gathered I then emailed the kids to arrange a Skype call for the next evening. After that, I called Ernesto to update him. "What's your plan?" he asked. "I'm going through the rest of the evidence. I have a lawyer appointment tomorrow and plan to deliver the divorce papers myself." "You're coming here?" he asked. "Yes, and I'll hand the evidence to the prosecutor too. You can stay with me. And Ernesto offered to put my family in touch with Lupe, who's a great cook. We had a good laugh, and I said I'd call when I'm ready to fly down. After that, I arranged to send money to Marcy through Western Union, which drained her account. Then I packed her belongings into trash bags, including our wedding album, and put them in her car. I called her parents to tell them about the divorce and Marcy's situation. They were really upset, but they agreed to pick up her things. They were pretty shocked to learn about her pill charges. Is there any way Marcy's involved in pills? Her father asked. Is there any way Marcy's involved in pills? Yes, I have evidence which I'll give to the prosecutor. After they left, I was pretty tired, so I grabbed a beer and a cigar and sat on the porch. Dira called to check on me. She asked how I was holding up. I said I'd been better, but her call was lifting my spirits. We chatted, and I shared my idea with her. After a pause, she said that was the best idea she'd heard in a long time. Let's do it. We ended the call on a positive note. I felt much better the next day. I met with my attorney, Lisa Hawkins, who was confident and professional. She was very different from Marcy's lawyer. I provided her with the evidence and explained Marcy's charges in Colombia. That should make things easier for us. Lisa said, "What do you want out of this?" "Everything except her clothes and car. I've already sent most of her money. Expenses are doable." "How do you plan to serve the papers?" "I'll deliver them myself. I'll have them ready in 2 days." We discussed going after Trey or her lawyer, but Lisa advised against it. She said such cases rarely succeed. I agreed and left after paying a retainer. Later, I Skyped with the kids to break the news. "I wanted to give you a heads up that your mother and I are getting divorced. I know it's a shock, but I'm here to answer any questions you have." Kyle asked if I had done something. I gave them a brief explanation and revealed that their mother was in a Colombian jail for drug trafficking. "Are you sure she's involved?" Rhonda asked. "I have evidence that I'll give to the prosecutor." "You're helping put her in prison?" Kyle asked. "I'm aware of that, but she broke the law. We've already talked about the dangers of pills, so I know that." Kyle said quietly, "It's just so screwed up." "It is, son, but your mom made her choice and she got caught." We talked a bit longer and I answered all their questions. It was a difficult conversation, but by the end they understood everything their mother had done and why I had to proceed as I did. I promised. I gave them the address where they could write to her. We ended the call with a tearful goodbye. I called Tom to arrange visitation for the day after I received the divorce papers. He agreed to set it up, and we ended the call. Then I updated Ernesto on my plans. "Who's prosecuting the case?" I asked. "Ricardo Montoya. He's tough." "Good. I'll bring him up to speed." I also had some evidence to show her. When we finished, I felt much better. 2 days later, Lisa told me that the papers had been filed and were ready for Marcy's signature. My bags were packed and my tickets were ready, so I grabbed my passport and picked up the papers and headed to the airport. Ernesto knew I was en route and got in touch to confirm the visitation setup. Ernesto met me after I cleared customs and we gathered my luggage before heading out. First thing, Ernesto asked to see Señor Montoya. I told him I would go and see him at the government building. Ernesto parked, and I went inside to see Montoya. A receptionist stopped me, but before I could say much, a man in a suit came in. I thought he was going to be Señor Montoya, but he introduced himself as Rick Weston. I shook his hand. "You're handling the case against my wife, Marcy, aren't you?" I said. "Yes," he replied. "I'd like to see the information you have on her." I handed him a thumb drive. "This contains video of her and Trey discussing moving pills and email exchanges. I've also included her email credentials if you want to dig further." He looked at me closely. "You know I'm here to put her away for a long time, right?" "I understand. So why are you giving me this evidence? Shouldn't you be helping her defense?" "No, I'm a retired Army intelligence officer. I can't ignore the law even for my soon-to-be ex. Wife, I'm also here to serve her divorce papers. Use the evidence as you see fit." Montoya nodded. "All right, Señor Weston. I'll review your evidence. How long will you be in Bogotá? Just a day or two? Enough to serve the papers and return to the States? Very well. Welcome to Bogotá." When I got back to the car, Ernesto asked how it went. "You were right, Montoya is tough," I replied. He laughed and said, "You have no idea. Let's head to my place. Lupe's been cooking all day at his home." Ernesto set me up in a spare bedroom, and I met his wife, Lupe, and their children. After a tasty dinner, Ernesto and I kicked back with cigars and a strong drink that lived up to its name. We chatted casually before heading to bed. The next morning, Ernesto drove me to the prison where Mar was being held. The conditions were rough and noisy, with a lot of people crammed into a small space. The room was small and smelly. We were led to a room where Marcy was waiting. She looked gaunt and exhausted. Shackled to the table, I sat across from her. I opened my briefcase and put the divorce papers on the table you gave me. "You gave me a choice, Marcy. You can either take me back or walk away. You know what I chose." Tears. She fell as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Rick. I never meant to hurt you." I replied, "You plotted with Leslie, saw Allison Hargraves, and tried to set me up. You lied about everything. I came here for one reason, signed these papers, and we're done. But I don't want a divorce. You want to make me your slave or ruin me? We're finished, so sign the papers." Reluctantly, Marcy picked up the pen and signed where indicated, with the embassy official witnessing our signatures. When it was done, I put the papers away. "Oh, and I said I noticed you paid in full for I'll use the Ambassador Ador Hotel reservation since you won't need it." "Go ahead," she muttered. "I'll also invite Dira. We'll finish what we started in the Middle East just once, if you don't mind." She glared at me with anger, but I shook my head. I said, "Everything you've done doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, we're no longer married. Enjoy your life." I stood up and walked out, leaving her sobbing at the table outside. I saw Montoya by his car. He came over, shook the embassy man's hand, and looked at me. "If you don't mind, He said he'd like to speak with Colonel Weston privately for a moment." The embassy man nodded and left. Montoya put an arm around me and said, "Walk with me. Colonel, please. Call me Rick. I'm no longer a colonel." "Call me Ricardo," he replied. "Once a military officer, always a military officer." "Officer, right?" he said. "Ernesto thinks highly of you. He's told me a lot of good things about you, Ernesto." I asked. "Yes, we served in the Army together when he joined AMN Global. I became a prosecutor. I reviewed your evidence. It's strong. It'll save my government time and resources, which is. I didn't charge you with criminal conspiracy because I was impressed by your plan. If your wife had been caught with a small amount, she might have been fined and deported. But thanks to Ernesto, nothing illegal was purchased, and the money you sent went to a charity for widows and orphans. They appreciate your donation. I was impressed by your cooperation and record, so I decided not to press charges. But if you ever try something like this again, I won't hesitate to take action. Thank you. No, thank you. The information you provided will be helpful. Justice is coming for your wife and Dr. Cardosa. I'm heading back to the States now." I said, "If you return to Bogota, maybe we can have dinner." He offered. "I'd like that." We shook hands. "Ricardo, thank you." I got back to Ernesto's car. Everything's fine with him. He asked if I needed a lift to the airport. I said I did, but I should have said I needed a lift to the airport on the way. Ernesto said he should have followed my orders. I told him he did the right thing. I'm the one who should have apologized for putting him in that position. Don't quit, boss. I understand how you felt. If it were me, I might have done worse, but it all worked out. Thank you for everything, Ernesto. I'll be in touch and I'll do my best to help Lupe and the kids. We shook hands and said goodbye. Dear Met, I met you at the Ambassador Hotel on the day I was supposed to meet Marcy. We finished what we started in the Middle East, and it was a night to remember. When we got back to the hotel, she said, I've put in my retirement papers thinking of a career change. I asked, what do you have in mind? Becoming a full... After a few minutes, she said, time for a change, I think. I'm going to be a wife and homemaker. I looked at her and joked, I think there might be an opening soon. Want to apply? I already did, she laughed. You know, I've fallen in love with you. I've fallen in love with you too, I replied. So shall we make it official? Even though my divorce isn't final yet, she asked. The divorce wasn't final yet, so I asked, why not? Will you marry me? She kissed me deeply and said, yes, Rick, I love you so much. Marcy and Trey were convicted of drug trafficking in Colombia and sentenced to 12 years in prison, plus hefty fines. Trey ended up in a terrible prison and didn't last long. Rival cartel members got to him. Marcy fared slightly better. She was in a women's prison but still had a hard life. She only had a few visitors, mostly from the embassy. The kids sent letters, but they were reluctant to reunite Penny with the others. Penny and the others were released after the trial, but Penny had a rough divorce and lost her job. I lost touch with Les and Vince, but I heard they continued their Leslie had to take a break after getting pregnant. Paternity unknown. After Dira and I married, we sold the house and bought a new one. She's happily transitioned to being a homemaker. I've offered her a spot at Acme, but she prefers to focus on building a happy home for us and her cat, which I don't mind at all.